Midday right here in Lagos, Nigeria. Welcome to Lunchtime Politics, reaching you live from our global headquarters. I'm Jeffrey Uzama. Let's bring you the stories we're tracking in politics and in the polity at midday. President Bola Tinubu, his wife Luremi, to be hosted by King Charles and Queen Camilla at Windsor Castle as the UK state visit kicks off. And the president asked ministers and other federal appointees who intend to contest for elective positions in 2027 to resign their position latest by March the 31st. Let's get things off the show with the directory or direction, if you will, from the presidency asking political appointees in his administration who intend to contest elective positions in 2027 election to resign from their posts on or before March the 31st. The directive was announced by the head of information and public relations of the Office of the Secretary to the Government of the Federation, Mr. Keshi. Mr. Keshi says the presidential decision aligns with Section 88(1) of the Electoral Act 2026 and the timetable released by the Independent National Electoral Commission for party primaries ahead of the 2027 polls. The order applies to all categories of presidential political appointees planning to participate in party primaries or seek nomination for elective positions. Those affected includes ministers of state, special advisors, senior special assistants, personal assistants, as well as director generals and chief executive officers of federal agencies, commissions, parastatals, and government-owned companies. We can also tell you that the Chief of Staff to the President, Femi Gbajabiamila, has described the ongoing economic reforms of President Bola Tinubu's administration as necessary bitter pills to reset the nation for future generations. Speaking at the State House while receiving a high-level delegation from Working People United, a grassroots labor movement led by its coordinator, General Comrade Williams Akbaho, Mr. Gbajabiamila emphasized that the president's decision to implement tough reforms early in his first term demonstrates his commitment to the next generation over political expediency.
We all acknowledge that these reforms are very difficult. There will be consequences because there are bitter pills to swallow, but that they are necessary. Now, what would a politician do? A politician thinking of his re-election will not embark on any of those reforms. He will coast along. And if at all, he will embark on those reforms in his second term, after securing his second term. That's what a politician would do. What a leader, whilst the politician thinks of the next election, a leader thinks of the next generation. So, as the president wasn't thinking of the next election, otherwise he won't make those decisions. He was thinking of the next generation.
As we look towards 2027, Working People United is resolute in its mission to ensure that Nigeria remains in the path of growth and opportunity. We are committed to working with you and Mr. President in mobilizing support for the actualization of what we call 4+4, renew hope vision of this administration, and to defend the progress that has been done.
Let's talk about that historic visit by the president. The last time a Nigerian president or a head of state visited the UK on the invitation of the monarch was sometime in 1989 May under a military administration. But today's historic visit commences the first in nearly 4 decades. by the Nigerian leader. This visit by President Bola Tinubu becomes the first Nigerian leader to be hosted by the British monarch at Windsor Castle. This visit brings Nigeria to global focus, again, as many see it as a significant milestone in Nigeria-UK relations. A London bureau chief, Juliana Layinka, who has been covering the president's visits, describes today as a monumental day, not just for Nigeria, but for the continent of Africa.
It is a monumental occasion, hugely significant, and I would say not just for Nigeria, for the entire Commonwealth. I sat down with the Commonwealth Secretary General yesterday. She is the first African woman to lead the member state, and she was very excited. So I've got to tell you, this is not just a state visit for Nigeria. This is indeed putting Africa on the map. If you think of that bridge between Europe and Africa, it is UK and Nigeria. So that's what we are anticipating today. This is a big global moment. The first time we're going to be seeing Mr. President will be, I would say, just before lunchtime, or probably lunchtime Nigeria time. He will be met by the Prince and Princess of Wales, Prince William and Princess Catherine. They will be receiving the President at his hotel in Windsor. Beautiful hotel, by the way. But of course, Brexit is going to be at the top of British minds. They want to renew these relationships with Nigeria. Let's not forget that, you know, Nigeria is a former colony. Britain does owe a lot to that nation, and I think now we really are, Malpe, going to see a renewing of ties. So this is huge, and as I said, it's not just Nigeria on the map, it's Africa.
Well, London bureau chief, she also sat down with the Commonwealth Secretary General, Shirley Ayoko Boche, because of this particular visit. And these are some of the conversation or excerpts of the conversation she had with the lady.
This visit is happening on the heels of Commonwealth Day. We celebrated Commonwealth Day a week ago. And so to have this visit is one that gives me a lot of happiness, because Nigeria is an invaluable member of the Commonwealth, one of the 10 top contributors to our technical fund. And we're very engaged with Nigeria. And so a bilateral visit like this showcases the country. It also gives the country opportunities, not just for bilateral talks, but also like a business forum, for instance, where you know, investments can be explored. And so for me, this is a great opportunity for Nigeria, especially since it hasn't happened in, I'm told, over 37 years thereabout. So this is the right time for it to happen. Nigeria is ascending in terms of development, in terms of its economy under President Tinubu's government. So this is the right time, and I'm happy that it's happening.
Let's bring in my guest, Ambassador Joe Keshi, is a former diplomat, joins us virtually. Ambassador, thank you so much for coming on the program. Ambassador, if you can hear me, if you can help us unmute your device. Can you hear us, sir? All right, Ambassador Joe Keshi is the former permanent secretary of the Foreign Affairs Ministry, or Ministry of Foreign Affairs as it is called. He's been in rooms, a lot of these diplomatic rooms, so have conversations that a lot of people may not be privy to in terms of what goes on when the cameras are off. So it's the right man to be able to give us what is expected to be happening in the rooms beyond the pomp and pageantry and the panache that we'll be seeing today at Windsor Castle. We understand this is the first time a Nigerian leader is being hosted at Windsor Castle. Ambassador, if you can help us unmute your device so we can hear you clearly and get the best of this conversation. Can you hear us, sir? Oh dear. So let's continue to see how we can catch up with it. So the last time a Nigerian president or a Nigerian leader, let's put it that way, it was in 1989. I think that should be around May when Ibrahim Badamasi Babangida, the then head of state, went to, on the invitation of the Queen of England, Queen Elizabeth II. It was a 4-day visit, and before that, we've had diplomatic tension under the Muhammadu Buhari administration, God rest his soul, as a military head of state because of the Umaro Diko incident of trying to kidnap the man over corruption allegation and putting him in a crate and all of that. Well, the British government saw it as a violation of sovereignty and an abuse of diplomatic privilege, and I think some of our ambassadors or some of our diplomats were expelled in that sense. So there was a bit of tension. But in between all of that, when IBB took over, there were issues around the economy. Import licenses or bill were given. We had in excess of maybe about $30 billion in debt because of what in excess were given in terms of import licenses as against what our foreign earnings could cover. And that was a big issue that caused the structural adjustment program between 85 and somewhere around 86. So behind all of this, we had a huge debt burden. We had the oil prices falling. The economy was not in the right direction. So all of the structures that were put together. And then it was a military administration in that sense. And so this was kind of, would you call it a validation? Because there was a transition in the works by that administration. So all of these things were the backdrop of the conversation, perhaps, that was held in the time of IBB. But it's almost a similar situation with the Bola Tinubu presidency. But the man who understands all of this is Mr. Ambassador Joe Keshi. Let's see whether we can bring him back, see whether the connection works for us. Ambassador, thank you so much for coming on the program. All right, let's see. We'll catch up with him in just a moment. I have a bit of a history behind all of this, the similarity between the visit of IBB, former head of state, and that of President Bola Tinubu, especially when it comes to reforms. The reforms of IBB, the structural adjustment program, took place in 86. The visit was in 89. The reforms started under President Bola Tinubu in 2023. The visit is 2026. So you can see what we're talking about. The usual economic orthodoxy were all applied and the impact is similar. But outcome is a different kettle of fish. But we're going to look beyond all of that to see what we're gaining out of this particular visit, beyond the pageantry, beyond the ceremony, beyond the prestige and diplomacy, what exactly is in for us. The president has listed some of those things. But let's tell you other stories as well, that in compliance with the 60 days directive for caretaker committees to hold congresses for the new state party executives, the Nyesom Wike-led National Caretaker Working Committee, or the PDP, has held its Congress to elect new leaders in Lagos State. The Congress is led by the party's National Deputy Secretary, Adedeji Doherty, alongside members of the state local government and 37 local council areas.
That person could have been qualified to be state chairman, but at least one person must occupy that position. I am enjoying the goodwill of everyone, and that is why I was chosen. So if of all the 39 that was chosen and they said I should lead the pack, I think it's just by the grace of God and their own grace too. I feel challenged in the sense that, to me, if you have been honored, you must deliver. So this is a new chapter, and we cannot deny the fact that PDP in Lagos State has a lot to do. We cannot deny that fact. So it is that challenge that I'm going to rise up to. And by God's grace, we are determined to put PDP back on track.
We are happy that all the structures in Lagos State have emerged now. You understand? We are now going to go up to the zonal level, make sure that the zonal level is also secured. You understand? We have Ogun, we have Ondo, we have Osun, we have Lagos, we have Oyo, and then we have Ekiti. You understand? And I believe and Oshu, you understand? So we have everybody on board. Reconciliation is very, very important. He has to bring everybody together and also respect our leaders, especially when they respect themselves.
All right, so Ambassador Joe Keshi joins us in just a moment, but there's an update. London Bureau Chief Juliana Lainka brought us, she's literally all over the place, making sure that we get bit by bit of this. Let's take a listen to her.
So this is where the symbolism meets strategy. Here in Windsor, President Bola Ahmed Tinubu is entering the most visible phase of this state visit, hosted by King Charles III. But beyond the ceremony, the focus is firmly on what this delivers for both countries. We're expecting the first key moment just before midday, when the ceremonial welcome begins, followed by the carriage procession into Windsor Castle just behind me. From there, the programme moves pretty quickly. We're expecting a full military reception, engagements inside the castle, and critically, private discussions where trade, investment and security are expected to dominate. For Nigeria, this really is about credibility. It's reinforcing its reform agenda and positioning itself as a serious destination for global capital. For Britain, it's about access, deepening those ties with Africa's largest economy at a time when competition for influence and investment across the continent is intensifying. In the evening, it culminates with a state banquet where both leaders are expected to set out that shared vision publicly. But the real work continues tomorrow in London, with meetings at Downing Street expected to focus on more concrete outcomes, including potential agreements. So, while today delivers the optics, the next 24 hours will determine the substance.
Ambassador, thank you so much for joining us on the program.
Thank you. I hope you can hear me now.
Fantastic. We've been itching to hear your thoughts on this. I like the way my colleague, Juliana, landed. He said today is about optics. Tomorrow is real about the substance. I don't know where you want to start from. So let me just binge a lot of it for you to relay your thoughts on. First, the issue, why is Westminster, between Westminster and Windsor Castle, there has to be some significance for this particular meeting as far as that venue adjustment is concerned, or picking of the venue is concerned. But beyond this, when a president or a leader visits the king in this sense and is going to see the prime minister, I do remember vividly that under IBB, we're dealing with high debt burden, structural adjustment program has coming, oil price had gone down, a couple of other things, but now we're dealing with similar issue. Then it was 30 billion. This is about 100 billion in terms of debt burden. We're dealing with asymmetric kind of warfare in our insecurity issue. We're grateful for the Bonga oil field that's going to be developed. Of course, 2027, we should be expecting an additional 150,000 barrels. But binge through for us what this is supposed to achieve, and we can say this visit was worth it.
Well, first, I think I agree totally with your correspondent from London. At the end of the day, when the curtain is drawn, when all the hypes, the carriage ride, the optics is over, what people would like to see is the outcome of the visit itself. And that is what is most important. When you realize that from being our colonial masters and the country we depended on, for a lot of economic transactions in the 60s and the 70s and to some extent in the 80s. When you realize that the British have virtually disappeared from Nigeria, except with very few industries, if any, and others have taken place, I think this is an opportunity for both countries to reset the relationship, and so what will be most important when the optics are over is the outcome of the visit itself, and exactly the concentration. Where are we going to benefit from, and where are the British going to benefit from? And the larger question is, does the British that we know today have the capacity to return in full force to Nigeria like they used to dominate the economy in the past? Of course, we all know that the answer is almost no. because other actors have taken over the Nigerian economic space. But there are also other critical areas where I believe that we need to, reignite our relationship. For example, in the area of education and technology. And I'm saying this because when the Indian Prime Minister, for example, visited Britain about twice, the focus was on technology, on training, a lot of Indians in AI and cyber security and the rest of it. So while we're looking at investment in the oil industry, where we're looking for the return of British companies, if they can, the other thing I think we need to focus on is on the education and science, because at the end of the day, as some economists have projected, that when you focus on some particular areas of development like education and health, you invariably help to begin to address the underdevelopment of that country, not the GDP, because we are focusing so much on the GDP. So this is a very historic visit, but what we should be looking out for is what comes out of that visit and the implementation of the decisions taken in London today and tomorrow will decide the future of British-Nigerian relationship.
Ambassador, you've said something quite important. If you were to be in the room, for instance, with the president, I'm looking at the list of the persons who traveled with the president. It's a lot. My assumption is that these persons will be engaging in, side conversation, bylined conversations as far as the visit is concerned. There's a lot. Sometimes you wonder who is left in Nigeria to do the work in that sense. But maybe they have their own wisdom of bringing this long list of entourage to go with the president to have some sideline conversation.
When it comes to the visits like this, Nigeria absolutely overdoes things. We've always done this. It's in our DNA. So, so look, at this critical time, for example, I think we have the Minister of Defense out of the country, and yet people are being killed. The service chiefs have relocated to the battle areas. But listen, service chiefs locating, we've been doing it for 15 years. It has never worked. Okay, but that's not the issue. The issue is that when it comes to such visits, Nigeria absolutely overdoes things. But again, I return back to what I said before. At the end of the day, is that the outcome will be judged not by the optics, not by the pictures, not by the carriage, but the agreements that will be signed and the implementation of those agreements. The question is, are the British going to come back to Nigeria in full force, or does Nigeria have the capacity to deliver quite a number of things, like play very hard in the British market? It's all about economy. And you know that popular saying, that is the economy stupid? That's exactly what we should be looking at, because we need a lot of investment in this country for development. And the question remains, can the British help come back in full force as they used to be before? And at the same time, there's areas where the British help build this country. In the areas of education, they have left that for a long time. Instead, they've done something very impressive, which many of us have not noticed. What the British did was to begin to come to Nigeria and recruit children of the rich who go to their own universities and pay a lot of money. So are the British now ready to make a change in that and invest in this country in terms of education, for example, in terms of science and technology? For goodness sake, these are the areas that can, that can help our economy to grow. So it depends on, again, as I said, the agreements that are signed when the curtains are down and the implementation of those decisions.
Ambassador, within the time we have, if you were to pick one or two things in the economy, I know that there's a SNEPCO deal that I think an FDI we've gotten to the point of a final investment decision, $20 billion, which I mentioned at the beginning. We're dealing with huge debt burden. We're dealing with security issues. So if you were to pick one issue in the economy, something that has to do with security, something that has to do with anti-corruption, especially immigration as well, what would you have advised the president to focus on as a measurable outcome that we can look at to say this historic landmark visit was worthwhile?
Given where we are today, I would have advised that we focus on security. Look, we need a lot of assistance in terms of resolving our security challenges. And of course, the other areas that I said, I thought that we do well to ask for assistance in order to, accelerate our technological development. Because if we do not do that, we wake up, look, some countries are already in a G7 or, in terms of the bandwidth, and we are just trying to migrate to the fifth one. So these are some of the most important areas, science and technology. And if they can help us train, particularly the young ones of this country, like they helped India. Look, again, I make the point, anybody can cross-check this. When the Indian Prime Minister visited in 2015, I think, they signed to train 1 million Indians in cybersecurity and in technology. If we can do that, if we can, have the same agreement and train 1 million Nigerians in that field, do you know what would happen to this country? I think that would be that will help us to live and leverage, on what the British is prepared to offer. And the other one, of course, is that are the British going to come back strong in terms of investment in this country? I'm not too sure, but we wait and see.
All right. I know that there's agreement that it's 746 million pounds financial deal between the UK Export Finance that has to do with maritime infrastructure with Lagos Port Complex and the Tinkan Island Port Complex. We understand that will be signed as well. But beyond all of this, I would like you to talk about the issue around immigration. Africans generally have been at the very receiving end of everybody trying to chase all of us out of wherever space we find ourselves, even though we contribute significantly to their economies, and the reasons are quite clear and in between politics and all of that. What would you be expecting the president to do in terms of the status of Nigerians and the ability to have, some level of understanding so people who travel and choose to stay there will have their head easy?
You talked of the agreement that is about to be signed in terms of maritime rehabilitation or whatever it is. Look, we've been spending so much on Lagos ports. I think Nigerian leaders need to understand that there are other ports in the country, in the South, for example. By the way, I'm speaking to you from Port Harcourt, where we are having a meeting similar to, on these same issues. There are quite a number of ports in this part of the world, in part of this country, that nobody in the last 8 years have paid attention to. So when all the ports are in Lagos are made functional, and the ports in the South are left desolate or, not functional, you know what's going to happen? More and more Nigerians will migrate to Lagos State. And I'm not too sure that, people in Lagos would like when the population, goes far beyond that, because there's what you call the pull factor in economics. So we need to be careful. Let the federal government remember that the ports in the South needs rehabilitation as well, and that they have the potential of opening up the region, both the Southeast and then, as a transport hub to Central Africa and down to Southern Africa and to Southern America. We need to remember that. But as for your
well, Ambassador, we're totally out of time. My apologies, yes. Sir. So we're totally out of time.
So that's what I think that we need to remember that. So if we are signing for this port, we should also sign for other ports in the rest of the country, so that there can be even development.
All right. Ambassador Joe Keshi is a former permanent secretary of Ministry of Foreign Affairs and a former diplomat. Thank you, sir, for coming on the program. Talking about economic marginalization, we can also tell you that the Chief of Defense Staff, General Lufemi Oloyede, and the Chief of Army Staff, Lieutenant General Waidi Shebo, have arrived in Maiduguri, the capital of Borno State, as directed by the President. So that's an update we'll bring to you on our bulletin subsequently. Thank you for watching. I'm Jeffrey Uzama. Bye-bye.